Hi guys, it's John here from Android Addicts, and this is a gaming comparison test between the Galaxy S22 Ultra, Galaxy S23 Ultra, Galaxy S24 Ultra and the Galaxy S24 Plus. You can see on the top left here we have two S22 Ultras, the Exynos 2200 variant and the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. On the top right we have the S23 Ultra with its 8 Gen 2, bottom left we have the S24 Ultra with its 8 Gen 3, and the bottom right we have the S24 Plus with its Exynos 2400. So this is just a test where I'm going to go through a few games. I have put time codes in the description if you want to jump to any particular part of the video, but I'll just explain the setup here. So you can see on each phone we've got a widget monitoring the FPS and the CPU and GPU load. Now on the Exynos phones I have had to use the PerfZ plugin because the GPU watch, which is running on the other phones on the Snapdragon processors, seems to crash games. I don't know why, but the games just drop back to the home screen. So I have used in some cases the PerfZ monitoring tool for the Exynos variant. Now on the phones where you can see the full screen, you can see the temperature as well. There's a temperature widget in the top right and also a battery widget, just so you can have a quick look at what is going on. Because of the way I've had to include two phones in the top left, you can't see the temperature or battery widget on those phones, but I guess those are the older models here and they're probably going to be less people worried about those, more worried about how the Exynos 2400 compares to the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. Anyway, you can see here this is COD Mobile and we have got the settings set as follows on the screen. So the Exynos 2200 can easily hit 60 FPS. You can see the CPU isn't being stressed too much and neither is the GPU. All of the other phones can do Ultra FPS, which is 90 FPS basically with the medium graphics set. You can't set anything higher than medium graphics, and as I'm sure you'll agree, all phones are running this absolutely no problem whatsoever. You can see the two S24s at the bottom. The 24 Plus with its 2400 is running its GPU a lot higher than the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. It's averaging about 45% on the Ultra compared to about 75% on the Plus. Other than that though, nothing really too amazing here. Okay, moving on to Fortnite now, and this is an interesting one really. Not sure why, but for some reason I can't get this game to run higher than 49 frames per second on the S23 or S22 series. You can see starting with the 2200, obviously this is the worst performer of the bunch. Even though it's set to 60 FPS, it can only just about reach 30. The CPU there getting maxed out completely. The 8 Gen 1 variant can run at about 40 at times, but it is jumping all over the place as you can see. When it calms down, it does run at this sort of weird, sort of locked 49. It doesn't ever go higher than 49, which is a very similar story on the 8 Gen 2 on the S23 Ultra. You can see here it sort of sticks around 49 FPS throughout the gameplay. Not sure why it can't go higher, but that's just the limitation, I guess, of these older CPUs on this game. So I've got the two S24s set to 90 FPS and low graphics. They do have the high quality textures turned on, but you can't select 90 FPS without going down to a low graphics. So it is what it is, but they do run very smoothly. I was quite surprised that the 2400 can run this at 90 FPS. When you look at the poor S22 with its 2200, it can barely hit 30 at the best of times. So seeing this at 90, it is quite amazing indeed. Now it does obviously drop a few frames every now and again, but overall it's a really smooth experience for the 2400, so quite impressive there. You can however see it's getting a bit warmer than the S24 Ultra, about 38 to 40 degrees, and the S24 Ultra is about 36 degrees. Looking at the older phones, you can see the S23 Ultra handles it okay, but we've got this 49 FPS lock. And yes, I am pretty terrible at Fortnite, as you can see. I think it's the inertia when you're moving around. I'm just not used to when compared to other games. But it is interesting to compare the two S24s again. You can see that the 2400 CPU is getting maxed out quite frequently. GPU not doing too badly, but yeah, that CPU is pretty much in the red for most of this gameplay. Temperature-wise, not terrible. About 38 to 40 on the 2400. And about 36 to 37 degrees on the S24 Ultra. Okay, moving on to Genshin Impact now. And these are what I have got it set to. So on the S24s, I've got it set to highest and 60 FPS, and these phones can run this absolutely no problem whatsoever. So I've got the other three phones set to medium and 60 FPS, and I was quite impressed that the 2200 can actually now run this at about 60. I'm not 100% sure if it's telling the truth all the time. This PerfZ monitor does seem to run a bit slower to the eye, but it does say it's doing around 55 to 60 FPS. Obviously the S22 Ultra with its 8 Gen 1 is handling it nicely, dipping down to about 50 to 55 at times, but you can see there the GPU working out really hard at about 70% all the time. Going over to the S23 Ultra, we can see again no problems at all at medium and 60. I did try on the highest, but it was lagging a bit, so I put it back down to medium, and this is, I think, the best setting to have it on for the 8 Gen 2, just to have a pretty much locked experience at 60 FPS. I think it's worth just dropping those graphics down to medium if you can. Now, don't judge my gameplay on Genshin Impact, you can see here, starting with the Exynos, this was quite early on in the game. I haven't played it much, so I do apologise, I'm not that far in the game, but hopefully I managed to get into some good areas on most runs here where it was testing the graphics a bit at least. But it can run pretty well on all phones nowadays, which is really good to see. You can see there the GPU on the S24 Ultra is pretty much at 100% as it is on the S24 Plus. 2400 running a bit cooler, but that is because it had only just been turned on. On average, it does run at about 40, I found. Right, moving on to PUBG now, and we can see here we've got smooth and extreme on our good old Exynos 2200, and it's doing pretty well. It hits about 50 to 60 FPS on average, so that's not too bad. The temperature of the CPU is getting quite hot there, you see about 41 degrees, so it is quite toasty, but it is running nice and smooth on the 2200 there. Gen 1, absolutely no problems running this at 90 FPS on smooth settings. You can see the CPU and GPU running nicely at around 50 to 60%. And then as we move on to the Gen 2 on the S23 Ultra, again smooth and 90 FPS, and you can just see those CPU and GPU averages running about 10% lower than the Gen 1. Obviously for the S24 Ultra and S24 Plus, this is absolutely no problem whatsoever. Pretty much locked at 90 for the whole match. Just dropping a few extra frames there on the 2400 as you can see, but overall really nice experience on all of the latest phones going all the way back to the Gen 1. Temperature wise, again you can see that the 2400 is getting a bit warmer than the Gen 3, about 2 degrees warmer at the moment. Now battery wise on these phones, I did charge them all up to 100% initially at the start of the test, but I wouldn't rely on that as an indicator of how much battery these games use. I just had it on there just for reference, but I have got a proper battery drain test. If you want to check that out, there's a link in the description and in the top right of the screen. But yeah, this runs really nicely. I'm amazed actually that the 2400 has support out of the gate for PUBG. Normally on the Exynos you have to wait months for the developers to add support. Maybe it's because of the 2200 and they've just managed to increase the FPS on the 2400 as well. Right, moving on to New State Mobile now, and you can see here we've got this set to medium and 90 FPS on the two S22 Ultras. Not really breaking a sweat there for the Gen 1. Working pretty hard there on the 2200, as you can see the CPU pretty much maxed out all the time. Gen 2 on the S23 Ultra doing really well, as you can see, hitting that 90 FPS nicely, but just dipping down to the sort of high 80s every now and again. But yeah, absolutely no sweat at all for the Gen 2. S24 Ultra, you can see obviously no problems whatsoever. CPU and GPU averaging about 50 to 60%, which isn't really much, and that temperature at about 41 degrees. So it's getting a bit warm there, but you can see there we are locked at 90 FPS pretty much. So that's a very smooth experience on the Gen 3. S24 Plus with the Exynos 2400, you can see not quite locked to 90, but it's pretty much at 90. We're just dropping a couple of frames every now and again. But again, you can see that CPU getting very red there in its utilization graph, along with the GPU at about 80 to 90%. So it is getting quite maxed out there for the 2400. Temperature as well is quite warm, about 43 to 44 degrees. But overall, a really surprising experience there for the 2400. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do like and subscribe. Let me know what your thoughts are down below, and if there's any other games you want me to test out, let me know in the comments. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.